Here we are then. Here is the Marvel Legends X-Men animated series Storm in box. The first thing that clearly strikes you about it is the nostalgic vibes, both from the outstanding Dan Wiesenmeyer artwork on the front cover, but also the retro VHS style packaging that they've put the figure in. I'm a big fan of the artwork, obviously as a nostalgic collector who's looking to tap into those warm, gooey feelings of watching the X-Men animated series, sat on my parents' living room rug, just soaking it in from the telly. This really just kind of totally evokes that for me. And it's a really dynamic, energetic piece of artwork that gives it some shelf space, particularly if you're an MIB type collector. I like the retro VHS packaging as well. It's just really, well, nostalgic. I've said it once already. You got the little Marvel Comics kind of symbol in the corner there. The kind of shape and size and feel of it in hand just brings back memories. I've mentioned it before and I'll mention it again. I love on the sides how it's got these little black semicircles to evoke the older, like little finger slide cutaways that they had on the VHS packages, and the little symbol there that replicates the video producer's symbol on it. So that's really fun. On the back of the packaging, we've got the digital render. We saw that, I think, when the first preview was done on one of the fan first, streamy things. Bit of blurb in various different languages here as well. With her weather manipulation powers, Storm can summon lightning across the sky or gentle rain over a parched land. So very good. And then all the legalese, all the legal malarkey along there. Right, so let's get her open then. Pop your finger in there. And with this plastic-free packaging, you'll see that the figure is being held in a kind of cardboard frame. Ooh, paperwork. So what we got here in the little bag there, some extra accessories. I think this is a changeable hand with some lightning effects on it, if I remember rightly. But it's been a while since I made the pre-order, so let's just... Oh, come on. Yes, I was correct. There we go. We've got the extra hands with the lightning effects. We'll take a closer look at them in a bit. And then let's flip this over. There you go. You can see the figure in this cardboard frame. So we'll take Storm out there in the protective little paper baggy thing. Slide her out like that. Oh, and she's got a bit of cardboard on her legs as well. And there we go. There is Storm out of the packet. Oh, that's making a very strong first impression straight out the box. I don't know if it's the white uniform, very vivid, immediately hitting me, but oh yeah, definitely looking forward to giving this one a bit of a play and have a pose around. So let's go and do that, and then I'll come back and review the figure. Here we are then. Here is Storm, all out the pack. I've been away. I've been having a little bit of a play. I've been posing her around, taking some photos in the light box, and I'm about ready to share some thoughts. So if you're new around these parts, just to bring you into the loop, the way I run my reviews is I follow the 3 A's. We talk about aesthetic, articulation, and accessories in that order. So we're going to begin by talking a little bit more about the way Storm looks. She's certainly a very striking figure with a lot of shelf presence, and I'm pretty sure that's because of the colour scheme. The white uniform, the big white hair that we've got going on there, the yellow trimmings with the grey kind of wingy things. There's probably a name for them, I don't know what it is, which gives it a great deal of shelf presence, particularly at this point now where the Marvel Legends X-Men animated series line has got a Wolverine and a Jubilee in the X-Men team, and there's a lot of yellow and blue going on there, so the white just really leaps off the shelf. But there's also lots of other things that will catch your eye about the figure. The cell shading effect, for example, really stands out on Storm more so than it has done on any of the others, and I was quite critical of the cell shading on Jubilee. It's because they've gone for a very dark black, a very pure black for the cell shading effect, and so it just stands out a great deal on top of her white uniform. So you can see these cell shady lines on the top of her arms, across the shoulder pads, across her breasts, down the torso and on the legs. The cell shading on the legs in particular I found a little bit frustrating because of the way the thigh swivel cut sits. We end up with this misaligned, as you're posing these weird misaligned kind of black stripes down her, which looks a little bit uncanny and a bit strange when you've got a posed her up, and I'm not a big fan of that. Bringing her in a little bit closer, I'm a big fan of the head in terms of how it looks. The hair is outstanding. All the shape and sculpt in there, all the individual wisps, and then as I turn it around, you'll see there's these little extra bits sort of sticking out, just really making her very wild and stormy, tish. Also, the finer details tremendous. The lipstick, the paint apps on the eyes, the eyebrows, the lovely little lightning-shaped earrings. The paint applications are really precise, very neat and tidy on there. And while the face is a little bit, I don't know, stern and expressionless and a touch bland, it kind of works for me because I remember Storm at times being a very serious character in the cartoon. Lots of other little bits of fine detail to enjoy in the figure as well. We've got her X-Men symbols here on the shoulder pads with a bit of red on them to add an extra splash of colour. I mentioned the yellow trimmings a little bit earlier, and they give it a nice bit of frame, you know, on the neck, on the belt, on the wrists, a little bit on the shoulder pads there as well, just to kind of frame it up and break up the continuous white. I'm also a big fan of a bit of texture to add some layers of details to my figure, and we can see some nice textural effects on the top of the arms here, across the belly, although I don't know if you can see it in my lighting. My light's hitting the white uniform quite harshly there, but trust me, it's there. There's some texture in the uniform to add some depth to the character and make it feel a little bit more real. Then you've got a grey and yellow wing pieces. These look alright. They're a bit of a faff. They're that funny sort of papery thing. I don't know what it's called. So it's all just very hard to manipulate. It looks a bit creased and squished up, and you know, see a fold there that I don't know, if I ironed it I'd probably melt it. So I don't know. So that looks a bit crappy. And then the way that it's attached on the arms with a bit of string just looks a bit cheap and cheerful, which I'm not a big fan of. And you can see there how they've kind of stitched the string wrist wrap onto the wingy piece here, opposite where it meets the wrists. And I don't know, again, it just looks a bit untidy, a bit crappy. I'm not the biggest fan of that. So even though I know it's kind of a key characteristic of the character's look, the implementation is a bit rubbish. You know, if I hold it like this, you can see how it's all kind of a bit kinky and a bit folded and doesn't drape nicely, and yeah, it's a bit, yeah, not the biggest fan. Thankfully though, round the back, where this joins the shoulder pads, is well disguised by the big 90s bouffant hair. So overall, a really good-looking figure. I've got some minor criticisms, like the cape having these kinks and folds and being a little bit cheapy looking, and the cell shading in the black seems a bit severe. I think maybe it might have been better with a grey or a light blue or something. I don't know, but that's just what immediately springs to mind. But the white uniform is very striking on the shelf. The head sculpt's outstanding. It's got little bits of texture in there to give it some life and some depth and some reality. She is just what my mind's eye thinks of when it comes to the animated series cartoon. I mean, I've not done a side-by-side comparison or anything, but it looks pretty accurate to me. Certainly enough to set off my nostalgic warm gooey feels. So overall, yeah, pretty good. The one thing that I will note that affects the way she looks, but also kind of neatly segues us into talking about articulation, is that she's not a great independent stander. And I've been struggling to get her into some of the more dynamic poses that I was trying to do a little bit earlier on today. Even with the foot stand, I found her toppling over. In fact, let me show you a section of a previous attempt to record this part of the vid. It will depend on how you are able to pose her. And as you can see here, I'm obviously using a foot stand. Oh, and there we go, case in point. Even with the foot stand, she falls over. Let's try that again. And so what that means, of course, is that sometimes the way she looks in terms of how you're posing her isn't quite where you might want it to be, and that's something to think about. But what that does do is it moves us quite neatly into the articulation section of this video. Let's start with above the shoulders then, and the head articulation. And the main thing here really is that the big hair limits your articulation options, your posability with regards to what's going on with the head. There is a hinge on the neck, and there is a ball under the head. So you've got your tilt options, and it can swivel, but as you can see, because of the way the hair falls down the back of the shoulders, the swivel is very limited and ends up kind of pointing her head, looking down towards the ground. You do have forward, but very little back. So if you're going to try and do some poses with her flying through the sky, looking ahead of herself, then this ain't going to do it. But, I mean, we can't criticise too much because what were Hasbro going to do? This is such a key characteristic of the cartoon character version of Storm that your options were clearly going to be very limited. Moving a bit further down into the shoulders and the arms, the shoulder pads obviously get in the way, but again, they're part of the uniform, they're part of the look of the character, so options were clearly going to be limited. You can get her arms up to a T-shape there, and while they have the capacity to go all the way around, your movement forward and your movement back is obviously restricted by the shoulder pads. There's not a butterfly joint in there, so there's a little bit of restricted movement compared to some more modern figures in terms of what you can do with the shoulders, which I think is because this is a reuse of an older version of Storm. You know, it's a repaint. Single elbow, which goes up to about there. The single elbows I'm not a big fan of on the female characters because you can end up with these weird kind of backwards looking bends that look like they've had a severe accident. And both the hands, left and the right hand side, have got a hinge at the wrist so you can move the hand back and forward. We've got the torso joint here, which allows a little bit of crunch forward, a bit of crunch backwards, although too far and you'll create a little gap there, look. And then some swivel side to side. No waist swivel, which is something that I've become a little bit accustomed to in my figures of late, but no waist swivel here with Storm, which is limiting some of the options again in terms of posing her. Then into the legs, pretty standard for a sculpt of the time, of the point at which this figure was originally made. We've got some pretty decent forward, some pretty decent out that direction. Not a lot of back because of the way the arse sculpt is. There is a swivel at the top of the thigh, a double knee, which goes to about there. And then we've got the ankle movement forward, back, and a bit of tilt side to side on the old dovetail there. I was thinking to myself, actually, when I was playing around with this figure earlier today, that I would have benefited from having a little bit of articulation here at the top of the calf, you know, like a boot swivel or something, but I understand, obviously, because of the way the uniform design is, that that's something that they probably wouldn't do. And again, this sculpt is from a time before that was more common. So there you go. But if I just put it down there now, yeah, it says it all, really. The accessories with the figure now are the changeable hands with the lightning effect on them. These are, well, I've got mixed feelings about these, to be honest. So let me pop them on the figure so you can take a look at them in the swap point, and then I'll talk about why they're causing me a few concerns. The hand swap process is a little bit fiddly because of the cape, the way the cape joins to the wrist there. Because when you pop the hand, you have to then sort of line up the wrist bits around the hand before popping the new one back in. But still pretty straightforward, just a bit fiddly. And there we go, there's Storm with her lightning effect hands. And as you can probably see, they're all right. I mean, I just think they look a bit weird. Like she's just growing twigs out of her fingers. Like a bit Groot, you know, just extra wooded bits of tree coming out of her there. Even despite the kind of transparent yellow look of them, it doesn't look lightning-y enough. I don't know what. There's something weird about the way that it looks and the way that they've molded it coming out the end of her fingers. That I don't know. It just doesn't look right to me. Maybe someone in the comments can explain to me why these look a little bit weird and uncanny to me. Because I'm just yeah. So I'm not a fan of these hands particularly. I like that they were included. I always like a bit of added value to my figures, especially at the price they're coming in at now. But these, I just think the implementation's a bit shaky. And let me show you something else. There's some weird paint application stuff going on here at the back of the hand where Storm's skin tone and the lightning effect sort of is meshed in a bit funny, and it doesn't look right. It looks very unusual. If I think, was it this one or the other hand? Might have been the other hand. Let me get the other hand. Yeah, it was the other hand. Look here. Look how the way it is on these two fingers down here. I don't know if the camera and the lighting is doing it justice, but it looks less like she's got lightning kind of wrapped around her fingers and more like she's had her fingers crushed in an industrial accident and they're all mangled up. or she's had a car crash like Doctor Strange, you know what I mean? So it's not really creating the effect that they were shooting for, and therefore looks a bit crappy, basically. I'm just not a fan at all of these hands. So, you know, like I say, well, I'm glad to have a bit of added value. I think it could have been implemented better. It doesn't look right to me, and I'll be sticking to the standard hands. Oh, there we go, back in focus. I'll be sticking to the standard hands. Here we are then, here's Storm in a kind of in-flight pose on the turntable, probably about what I'm going to do using my flight stand here, when I've sort of finalised the display, as it were. And yeah, you know, it looks all right. I think it's a bit bland, really, in terms... It's the articulation that I've got a problem with. Hasbro have got to stop just reissuing these old sculpts with old articulation points with a new paint job and milking the more recent collectors like myself. It's just... that. I mean, that's the heart of the problem, because I actually quite like the figure, and to not have a Storm in my animated X-Men display would just be an unforgivable omission. I said this with Jubilee too. And I'm happy to own one. I like the figure, and once I've found the pose that I like with it, I'll be there. I'll be happy. The head sculpt is great. The hair is awesome. It really does make me think of the animated series cartoon with the colour schemes and all that. So it's there. It's doing what it's supposed to be doing. I just think for the price we're paying now, and what I've come to expect from my figures. I mean, like, Lady J from my G.I. Joe Classified just shits all over this figure in terms of articulation points and posability, and how well I can get her into displays and all the added value with the accessories. And so by that comparison point, I think that's what's happening, is I'm comparing to the other lines like G.I. Joe Classified. And therefore making me feel a bit more disappointed about certainly the female figures, and less so with the male figures. And I understand there's limitations in terms of body shape and such like, but yeah, come on, you know, the single elbow, the whole restricted movement in the head thing because of the hair, and I know that's not Hasbro's fault, she has that hair, just means that I've found her less fun to play with. You know, I have just bought this to be a completionist as part of creating a display, and I've not had a kind of off the shelf. I did a bit of initial playing and then kind of put her on the shelf and then came to record the video, and I think that speaks volumes, you know, in terms of how I feel about the figure. But there you go. Hopefully, if you're thinking about picking one up, this has helped you make your mind up if you're on the fence. If you've enjoyed my review today, then please do take a moment to give me a like down below and subscribe to the channel. I'm Chris from MoDXtra Games and Collectibles, and I do action figure reviews, I do board game reviews, I do comic book reviews, trading card reviews, basically any kind of nerdy nostalgic collectible that this big old man-child from the 80s brings into his house, I'll make a video out of it, and this might just be the channel for you if you like an eclectic mix of stuff from the broad church of nerddom. So there we go, there's Storm. She's kind of a bit out of sync with me now because I spoke faster than I planned on doing, so come on. I wanted to finish with her facing forward and I've sort of messed that up. But you're all now sat there watching this video seeing how the sausage gets made. Because in my preparation, I had a specific timescale, and I failed to talk in that timescale. What are you going to do? There you go, wibbly wobbly on the stand. And there we go, there's Storm from the Marvel Legends animated X-Men series range.